Welcome to Grief Sucks Life After Loss. I am your host, Linda, and today I'm here with Mandy. Welcome, Mandy.
Hi, Linda. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I've been wanting to have you on here for a while and you're just busy.
I know. Schedules, man. I'm telling you, kids keep you busy, work, all of the things that are going on in life. So,
Right.
yeah.
And Jamaica.
Oh my gosh, yes. Jamaica. But it was for work. I was only there for like 2 days, but still, it was Jamaica and it
So
was
you was
warm.
in Jamaica?
Yeah, it was wet. It was like 90 degrees there, like 20 degrees here. So I can't complain too much. But yeah.
And how cool is it that you guys get to bring people from Jamaica to work at the Girl Scouts? That is awesome.
I know. I love it. Yeah, I'm so excited about this upcoming summer, bringing our international staff program back and bringing that cultural portion of camp. That camp experience is really great for our campers. It's for them, for our staff, just everybody to learn from each other. I'm so excited about this program.
Yeah, that's very exciting.
Yeah.
So instead of talking about work, we're going to talk about real life or other life, the downside of it. So if you would like to share your story.
Sure, I'd love to. So in 2017, I lost probably the most important person in my life, and that was my brother. We truly were best friends. It was about 5.5 years difference in between our ages, but everybody said we were like twins because we really were together all the time. We ran around with the same people. It just was, our lives were pretty intertwined with each other. So it was a pretty hard loss. And it was a really tragic loss as well, because unfortunately, he was shot and killed in his home. And so having to deal with that, that tragedy of, one, another shooting in Indianapolis, and then two, just tragically losing someone like that at 28 years old. Just so many dynamics, so many feelings, very unexpected. And there's trauma that comes just with being, affected by gun violence. And then there's trauma affected with, losing someone that was young. And Chris was one of those people that he literally never met a stranger. And, even at his funeral, we heard so many people say, like he helped them in different ways, whether it be find a job. He helped them, he's like, hey, he literally gave me the shirt off his back. Like I literally had nowhere to go and he let me crash on his couch for a week. So I wasn't sleeping in my car, just all kinds of things. My sister-in-law even told us afterwards, she said, she was like, I don't always feel great about myself sometimes, but she's like, on your wedding day, he walked me down the aisle and he made me feel like I was the most beautiful person at the wedding that day. And that was just the kind of person that he was, in making people just feel that way and just feeling good about themselves. And so losing him definitely had a domino effect on so many people. And I think a lot of people don't see that, right? They don't see the fact that it's not just the parents and the siblings and the spouses that are the ones affected. I mean, there are people that they're connected with, you sit with them in the cafeteria at lunch every day. You sit with, you just pass them in the hallway at work, whatever that case is. Like it just has a
And
huge
when
domino
you
effect on so many people and the impact that we have.
and when you see that domino effect, I'm sure you feel the same way I do. It feels like they truly left a legacy. Like if you was ever like
Mm-hmm.
that's what you want out of life is you truly made a difference in people's life and you hear people say, you want to leave a legacy, but that is it for me. Like just to see the impact that they had on everybody's lives. A lot of people don't get to do that. And it's very special.
No, they don't. It is. It's extremely special. I think about KJ. I think about the impact that he had on my life and all the memories that we had together because I was lucky enough to know him. And, um, you know, we went through a lot. He did some crazy dances on a boat with me once to sing some Girl Scout songs to make your daughter happy. So
It was
it's
funny
pretty
because
special together.
I was just telling Dylan last night. I said I got my podcast in the morning. He's like, "Oh, who's it with?" I said, "My friend Mandy." I said, "Well, actually, I met her when your dad and I got together. She was dating Larry." He's like, "And y'all are still friends?" I was like, "Well, yeah, like it's John's best friend. Like we also like are friends and we're cool." He's like, "This is weird."
I know. It's hard to believe we're all still connected. We're all still, but it's great. I mean, I think about the impact, he had on me. He was always down for a good time, and so I love that. Um,
Except for the one time we
you
lost
know,
the dogs.
oh yeah, well, that happened last year. um, yeah. Um, thinking about, you know, a little bit about, Chris, our biggest fear was, you know, Chris was an uncle. He was also a dad. His son was 10 months old when he died. And then he also had a stepdaughter who was 4 at the time. And how do you explain to children that the person that they loved and looked up to, that was their hero, legit, he was my kid's hero. Uncle
Mhm.
Chris was like, you could not, beat the ground that he walked on. He walked on gold as far as they were concerned. And how do you explain that to them? You can't just come home and say, hey, somebody shot your uncle, because then it's going to come back to, bad dreams. Is the bad guy going to come and get me? Am I safe in my home? There's lots of trauma that can then be impacted with the kids, and
That's a whole
how that goes. And
different
so,
thing.
whole other thing, exactly. And how do you tell them that? Like, how do you approach them? And when they start asking questions, what happened, how, why is he not coming back? And my son, my youngest, Mason, he was 3 at the time, and he couldn't understand why he couldn't use my cell phone to call Uncle Chris in heaven, because doesn't heaven have cell phones?
Right.
Like, he just could not like understand, because Chris was here yesterday, so why is he not here today? Why can I not call him? I call him every day. So it was just, and so we're like, how do we do this? And one of the things that we were very, very fortunate with is that, when we were in the hospital and they told us that he wasn't going to make it, we probably needed to have additional plans made. My mom, being his next of kin, really, she could have made all of the decisions. She could have decided everything, but she decided that that's not the way we were going to play this.
Mhm.
It really was going to be a family affair, and making every decision when it came to Chris and what his medical plan was going to be moving forward. And so I will never forget the night that he did go into the hospital, and I got a call. It was literally 3 o'clock in the morning, and I rolled over like half asleep, and I'm like, my mom's calling me. Why the heck is she calling me? But something told me, go ahead and answer. And she was so calm on the other end. This is the part I'll never forget. She literally was so calm, and she's like, hey, I just wanted to let you know I'm on the way to the hospital. Your brother's really sick. Like, just don't call me when you get up in the morning, because usually we talk every morning,
Yeah.
when we get up. She's like, so just don't call me, because I might not have service, because I might be at the hospital. And I thought to myself, I'm like, Mom, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, I'm coming, right? Like, somebody
Yeah.
said, just, I'm coming. So I got up and I got my clothes on, and out the door I went, and I headed to the hospital. And so when I got there, I literally parked my car, and my phone rang again, and it was my mom again. This time she was more panicked. I mean, she's like, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? And I said, I'm at the hospital. I just pulled into my parking spot. She said, I need you to run as fast as you can. And I'm like, okay. So I run to the emergency room, and I told them I was there to see Chris, and they said, oh, your family's already here. Follow us. And so they took us into a room, and in that room there was, my parents were there. My sister arrived right after I did. There was also like a clergy and a couple of police officers. And that's when they told us, what had happened, that he'd been shot in the middle of the night, and that, he was still alive. He was still breathing on his own, and that they would take us back to see him. Well, of course, the only thing I could think of is I have to see it to believe it. Like, just get
Yeah.
me there, right? Like, just get me
Yep.
back there. Let me see my brother. If he knows I'm here, everything will be okay. And so I remember walking those hallways and feeling like it literally was like 3 miles long. I literally felt like we turned left and left and right and right, and just like it was like so far away. And I don't know how people found out, but literally within an hour, we had so many people at the hospital, so many people, and they just kept coming. And they moved us up to an ICU room, and they had told us that day, they're like, we've never seen this many people here. We literally were taking up 2 giant ICU rooms and like waiting rooms, and they were having to find another place to put us. And like, just more and more people kept coming.
Yeah.
And so it was a little after, it was like 1:30 or so in the afternoon. And a doctor came out, and she's like, hey, I'd like to talk to Mrs. Curry. And my mom stood up. She's like, I'm Mrs. Curry. She's like, I would like the family to join me in the room, so we can talk next steps. And one of the things that they always did all day long is that they told you about all of the next steps, like repeat to me, what have you heard, what do you know, they wanted to make sure that no steps were missed, that you really were
Mm-hmm.
comprehending all the information they were giving. And so when my mom said, "That's me, I'm Mrs. Curry," and they said, "We'd like you to join you in the room," my mom literally looked around at this group of people and she's like, "We're all family here, we're all coming,
That's
everybody's coming."
amazing.
We literally, it was like it, and the doctor just kind of looked around, like she wasn't sure what to say, right? But she's like, "Okay." And so this itty bitty hospital room, I'm telling you, over 40 people were literally as close as you could be, in this hospital room. And the doctor kind of looked around, not really knowing what to say right now,
Yeah.
because I think she was a little overwhelmed with the amount of people. And she's like, "You know what, before we start and we start going through all of these things, let's talk about, I would just want to know all of you. How do you know Chris? Right? Like, tell me how you know Chris." And everybody took turns going around. Of course, you heard the typical, he's my grandson, my son, my brother, those kind of things. But then you heard, like, people didn't say he was my friend. Literally, they would say he's my brother from another mother, because that is how Chris saw his friends. Like, they were
Yeah.
family to him. And so, just the number of people in that room that, continued to say that. And it just was pretty cool. And so the doctor asked my mom to repeat, everything that she had heard the whole day, what she knew so far and all of that. And that's when she told us that Chris was brain dead and that he wasn't going to come back. And so we needed to talk about next steps. And so we had agreed in our family meeting that morning that if Chris did not pull through, that we were going to donate his organs. And so they brought the Indiana Donor Network in and they talked to us, and come to find out, thankfully, he actually was already signed up to be an organ donor, which was
Oh.
absolutely amazing. So we knew that we were following his wish in what he wanted. So they started the process with all of that. And Chris was actually, they had 3 organs that they believed that were viable. That was his lungs, his kidneys, and his liver. Um, Unfortunately, his lungs were not going to be able to make it because he caught pneumonia in the hospital. And so they didn't want to, give that to someone else. And then also the time of transplant, they just didn't feel comfortable that they'd be putting the other person at more risk.
Yeah.
So they passed on the lungs. And then his kidneys, they did put him on dialysis, but unfortunately they also had, been infected as well. So they decided to pass on the kidneys, but his liver was still strong. And so he was able to give his liver to someone and help them live, which was in itself a miracle. So
Absolutely.
that was awesome. Um, yeah, our family has been lucky. We actually have met his recipient.
Oh, you did?
So she doesn't live too far from us, and she actually, she has her own story, but she had given up on life. She needed a liver. She'd gotten a liver, and then something happened, and she wasn't going to be able to have the transplant. And so
Oh
she had made up her
no.
mind. She said, "You know what? I'm done living in a hospital. I'm packing my stuff. I'm going home. I'm out of here." And
Yeah.
she tells us, to hear her tell it, like, it was just like a TV show. She's like, "Literally, I was walking out the door and they said, 'Stop. We have a liver for you. We can make this happen.'" And it was Chris's.
Wow.
So, yeah, and just, yeah, as we talked to her, like, the connections that she had and the commonalities that she had with our family, it was almost like Chris picked her, right? Like, I'm going to help this person. She
Yep.
has so many connections to my family and the things that they love, and there's things that she does that I love too. And it just was one of those, magical moments to be able to do that. And so, for us, that was our focus for our kids. Come back to our kids, like, how do you explain it, all of that. Okay,
Yeah.
we're changing this narrative now. Chris is not a victim of gun violence. Chris is a real life superhero.
Hero.
And back in 2017, that, like, Avengers, they were huge. I mean, they're still really big, but then they were really big. So to our kids, that meant Chris was a real life Captain America, right? Like, we have a story to tell them. We have something that we can focus on, and telling that. And so, through all of that, the grief was unbearable. I mean, I won't lie. Like, it was like, okay, here's the story I'm going to tell my kid, but I'm still, like, unbearable grief. Like, I can't get out of bed.
Absolutely.
I can't, I'm not. a good mom. I'm not being a good mom, you know? And my husband literally came in one day and said, you need to get your butt out of bed. Like, our boys need you. Like, you have got, he goes, I know you can't get over this, and I'm not asking you to do that, but our boys need you. Like, they need their mom. And I was just, and I, that moment I realized I have to do something, right? Like, I can't be living in this space because this is where I'm at. I'm living in this space. My best friend is gone. And I just like, I literally felt like a piece of me was gone, and I couldn't function. So, I went to therapy, and, it didn't work. You know, it didn't work.
It wasn't for me either.
I was like, all I feel like I'm doing is I'm going in, I'm crying. You're telling me, I'm telling you my story, and then you're like, okay, time's up. See you next week. Like, I'm a person of action. I need some tangible like actions, and I need you to tell me what to do. And so a friend of mine, um, and that I met through another company I was working for at the time, she was a life coach, and she said, you know what, Mandy, I'll be your life coach. Like, let me help you. Let me do this for you. And she's like, but I'm going to be honest. I'm going to kick your ass.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm going to get your butt out of bed. Like, I'm going to tell you what you're going to do. And before you meet me the next time, you're going to do stuff. Right.
Yep.
And that was one of the best things that ever could have happened to me. And so through that journey with her, we talked a little bit more, and she's like, tell me what you're passionate about. Like, tell me about your brother. Tell me about like what he was passionate about. And, you know, and it kept coming down to the fact that the story I was telling my kids, right? Like, I'm telling my kids this story, but am I really believing it? Did it really have that big of an impact? Is it
Right.
really that big of a deal? And so I just happened, I went to the Indiana Donor Network website, and there was a call out for advocates, for volunteers to come out and advocate and to talk about your story and, you know, to do this. And I said, you know what the heck? I'll put my name in. It's probably not for me, but I'll see what it's about. So I did. And I went through a training, and now here we are, 2024. I've been an advocate for years. They
Mm-hmm.
have, their aftercare program is beyond belief. Like, the support they provided for our family, the events that they host for our kids. My kids go to Donor Hero Camp every year, every summer. They get to be around other kids that have lost somebody and they've been affected by organ donation. So they're with kids that understand the grief. You know, they host kid events throughout the year. They host family events for all of us. I go out and I tell Chris's story. We have a team that joins their 5K every single year, and we go and we represent Chris. And Chris's photo is in what they call their Garden of Hope area, so people can remember all of those people. And then even you know, taking it beyond that, I work for a nonprofit. I work for Girl Scouts, and I was like, how can I bring these two amazing organizations together? How can I spread you know, the education with kids, and, you know, start it young, so they understand the importance of organ and tissue donation. And so with a partnership with Indiana Donor Network and Donate Life Indiana, we created a program kit during COVID. I literally had this crazy idea. Nobody could come to camp. Camp was canceled. And I'm like, what are we going to do? We got to do something. So we decided we're going to open up our camp properties, let families come and have a good time. And so I called my friends at Donate Life, and I said, hey, here's the deal. Like, I've got to come up with activities. Do you guys want to partner with me? Do you want to do something? And they said, we're all in. We're all in. So together we created a program kit that we handed out to families, and it was conversation about organ tissue donation. They got to wear like scratched up glasses to understand what it was like to need a cornea transplant. They were breathing through straws to understand what it meant to be a lung recipient. Like, just all kinds of different activities. It was so cool. Fast forward a little bit, and the next year, it was actually our kit and our innovation was nominated for a national award amongst other organ donation organizations across the country, and we won an award.
That is amazing.
So just bringing that full circle and knowing, isn't that so cool? Like, it's so cool. And so, and I come back and I'm like, this is because of Chris, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I found my why. Like, why was this, you know, why Chris, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why did Chris have to die? And I come back to, even though I miss him tremendously, I could not imagine my life without, like, I still can't imagine my life without him. Some days it still feels like the first day, but I'm like, this is why. The impact that his story has to spread to thousands that are going to continue to save thousands of lives moving forward. Like, that's the why.
Yep.
And that's the kind of person Chris was. It comes back to him, right? Helping people. That's what he did. And so, yeah, it's just, yeah,
And
I
it's
love it.
crazy because like I would have never started a podcast or um, anything like this, but I'm like there. It's not talked about enough, um,
It's not,
and I think at the end of the day, we're all grieving something, which I mean in all different forms, but I just felt like there had to be a reason why. There had to be something bigger to come out of it. So when I started this, I'm like, there may be two people that listen, but if it helps one of them, then that's great because that's the point in it is just trying to connect with others who have gone through the same things or just how to heal in a different way other than being
mm-hmm.
stuck where I mean, I went through the period where I'm sure I wasn't a good mom. I thought I was doing the best I could, but did I do it right through grief? Fucking who knows? We don't know. We're just doing the best that we can
Yeah.
through the situation, and sometimes you need that person that says, "Hey, get your ass out of bed. Something has to be done. You can't stay there." I'm big on you can be down, but you got to get back up.
Mm-hmm.
You can't fucking stay there because it does nobody any good.
Nope. Mm-hmm.
And I love that um, Chris is always there. Like, there's often I see your posts like, happy heavenly birthday, Chris, for yesterday. But I just love the way that you guys
Yes.
honor him constantly and constantly talk about him because I think that's another big thing in healing. I think some people just tuck it away and don't talk about it because they think if it's not there, they don't talk about it, they don't see it, they don't hear it, they don't have to deal with it. Um, but deep down that lingers and that doesn't help. And
Mm-hmm.
I that was our main thing was from the day he died, we talked about KJ every day in general conversations, me and the kids, just in whatever. We never tucked that away. And I think that gives you a freeing, just something freeing about it. It just helps heal where some other people didn't do that and they are still struggling today. But I can honestly say that I think
Mm-hmm.
my kids
Yeah,
and I
I think
are
people
in
can
a good
relate to it.
space. Yeah. It's just I mean everybody deals with it differently, obviously, and I also think that for some of us it comes easier to snap out of it and deal with reality and things like that, and other people may not be able to, but hopefully maybe listening to something like this will help be able to do that or getting the proper help. Like a therapist didn't work for me. I went a few times and I'm like, you probably have never lost anybody a day in your fucking life. Like, how can you help me? You're nice, but this ain't working out.
Yep. Not my
Um,
story.
yeah, you don't know, you haven't been there. And then like the life and grief coaches, I'm big on those, and mainly because in my healing, I always have to do something. I have to be busy or whatnot. So during my healing, I took a life coach course.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that helped me heal. I never did anything with it, but it helped me. It helped myself, and I think a lot of times that
Mm-hmm.
those people become those people because they've been through things, they've dealt with things, um,
Yep.
and they can better relate, they can better help than
Mm-hmm.
sometimes a therapist can. And some people love therapists, and I'm not knocking that, but I do think that the life coaches and such that's their passion, not just a
Mm-hmm.
job.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Well, and I think therapy does work for some people, right? Like, I think
Mhm.
there's not a one size fits all for anybody. Like, you have to find that thing that works for you. For me, it wasn't therapy. It wasn't working. And, and I felt like as Chris's big sister, I'm the oldest of three. I'm the big sister. I'm responsible for my younger siblings. Here I am. I'm 40 years old now. I still feel responsibility to take care of my little sister. She's 36 years old. Like, she doesn't need me, but I feel responsible, for that. And so when he died, then I felt like I had responsibility to take care of his son, right? Like, I have responsibility to
Yeah.
tell his story, to make sure that his son knows who his dad was and, you know, all of that. So, I think that our journey has been a big portion of that is, as Finley grows up, what's he going to get to know about his dad? How's he going to get to know him? Like all of those things are important, and having those stories come up, not only is it healing for all of us, but it's a story for somebody that's never going to get to know him, who is
Mm-hmm.
probably the most important person that he could have in his life, should have in his life.
Yeah,
So, and
absolutely.
he doesn't.
And how did you, like, in the initial impact, how did you get the kids through? I mean, because there was a lot of kids involved. Um, what was your main
Yeah.
resource?
It wasn't easy. So at first it just was, Uncle Chris went to heaven. Like that was really the only thing we could come up with right now. Uncle Chris went to heaven. When we had a firm understanding of exactly what he was able to donate, then it was okay. Let's focus on a superhero, all of that. My oldest, he's now 22 years old, so he was a teenager at the time. We did bring him along for the ride. We did
Yeah.
allow him to know what happened. We gave him the choice if he wanted to come to the hospital and say goodbye before we did, send him in to donate. And we let that be his decision. The others
Mm-hmm.
we felt like were too young to be able to make that decision, or that it would cause more harm. So we opted to not allow that for them. Um, as they've gotten older, some of them do know what has happened, and we've had long conversations about it. And we've asked them, if you want to, if you want to join groups, or you want to talk about, to somebody, you want to, we're more than, happy to be able to find that support for you. Um, because a lot of them were so young when it happened, it hasn't affected them necessarily in the same way. They
Yeah.
still remember him. They still can remember his stories, and they talk in a positive light about him. And they always end it with, my Uncle Chris is a superhero. He is my hero. He is going to be a hero forever. A lot of Chris's favorite movies have then, become their favorite movies. A lot of his favorite songs have become their favorite songs. So, they listen to them, or they watch those movies, and they're like, well, let's watch this. Yesterday was my brother's birthday, and my youngest was like, let's listen to this song because Uncle Chris loved it, and it's,
Oh.
so everything is coming from a positive light. They're just so positive, in that space. And we tell them, like, you need to be there for Finn. You need to tell the stories and the memories that you remember, because he's going to want to talk
Mm-hmm.
to you, and he's not always going to want to listen to us. We're old people now, right? Like, we're not cool. Well, you guys tell him about him. And so just keeping all that, pictures are still up everywhere. Like, he
Mm-hmm.
will not be removed from that space. And we talk about those times. We talk about the pictures. We go places. And my mom's a firm believer in, you find a penny and a dime, and
Mm-hmm.
that means that they're there. And so I always find a shiny penny every trip I go on. And I always say it's my brother that's with me, because he was pretty much my ride or die, and crashed I don't know how many of my family vacations, because he didn't have a family. So he's like, I'm coming with you. And so I always say, oh, Chris is here, crashing the party again. But we just try to keep the positive light, and just remind him that Chris is still here. He's watching over us. One thing he always said, I have your back. I got your back no matter what, all the time, to everybody. And so we always tell our kids that we've got his back on earth like he's got ours in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just got each other's back. And for a long time, we had his dogs. He had two dogs, Mercedes and Gizmo. And so I couldn't take both, because I already had two dogs of my own. And so I took Gizmo, one of them. My sister took Mercedes. And we told the kids, we brought them along. We're like, look, Uncle Chris just needs us to watch his dogs for a little bit. He'd have our back. We got to have his. And we're going to take care of them until Uncle Chris tells us that he can take them back. And so even when we did end up having to put them down, because they were older, we just recently put them down in the last couple of years, that, we told him, Uncle Chris called and he said he's ready for them to come home and live with him again. And our kids have been able to accept that. So it's all just, we're giving him back. And even with Mercedes' ashes, we told the kids that we could go to Uncle Chris's grave, and we could, sprinkle some of her ashes on the grave.
No.
So they really had that physicality of giving her back to him. Like, there was actually a visual. It wasn't just like it was happening. It was, we
Yeah.
saw it happen. So now it's real. So we've done all of those things just to guide our kids along the way. And a lot of that's, thanks to the aftercare team at the Indiana Donor Network, because they are professionals and they help us, guide us through that when we're like, we don't know what to do with our kids. They're asking us these questions. They're, this is happening next. Like, how do we deal with this next wave of grief? And they are there to support us and provide guidance and in
That's
everything. And here we are, it's 2024. He died in 2020, in 2017.
that's amazing
They treat
because
it like it was yesterday.
it's such a delicate space, and you don't, obviously as parents we have to teach them how to, for my kids it was their first major loss, um, and we have to guide them and teach them how to get through that. For me it was
Mm-hmm.
not becoming the people that I had removed from our life, I guess, if that makes sense, and not turning to alcohol, not turning to drugs, like all of that. Um, because I had to teach my kids how to get through that. And again, if you fall, that's fine, but you have to get back up and you have to live life through that. My kids were older. Michaela was a senior in college, getting ready to graduate. Um, Dylan was 13, and we let them at the hospital. I gave them the option. You can go see him one last time. That's total. I totally left that up to both the kids, but I did let them know that that would probably be your last memory. Because for me, that was my last memory of my grandfather, and it was the worst shit ever.
Mm-hmm.
So Michaela chose to, and Dylan chose not to, which was fine. When we did the funeral planning, we let the kids plan basically both of them. For Valerie and KJ, it was just like, you know what? At the end of the day, whatever you guys want, we'll do it. So they were both involved in both of those. Um, so I think not easy, but easier with the older kids. But when it comes to the nephew, that was a little bit rougher. And the hits just kept coming. So it wasn't just, his uncle and his grandma. Then a couple months later, it was another grandma, and then a couple of months later, it was the grandpa, another grandpa, and it was like, fuck, do we? They just disappeared. Do we keep telling him, like, at what point do you? I mean, because he was little. He was like, I think 5, and you're like, what do you do with this? Because it just kept coming. So I think the way that you guys have handled it is fucking amazing, and it's a great. You've made it a good experience for them, if one could make that a good experience.
Yeah, yeah, we've tried, and I wish that, when I think about like organ donation, I wish more families did consider it, right? Because when you think about, not only you are saving someone, and the importance of
Mm-hmm.
that, somebody else needs that. It's going to allow someone else's loved one to live, but being able to tell that story and to, keep that legacy alive and have that memory of them, to continue that journey, I think is really important. And I know not all families are lucky enough to have that. And for us, we were able to take a tragedy and we were able to turn it into something positive and say, hey, we're not gonna dwindle on the fact that this is what happened to us,
Right.
but how Chris helped someone else and just continues to do that every single day. With every time that we go out and talk about it, that's Chris spreading his message. Chris has just
Yep.
given us that gift to be able to spread that word. It's just, but it's our responsibility to continue to do that for him. So that's Chris's story. That's not my story. That's his story. He did this, not me.
Yep.
But because of him, I have a heart on my driver's license. I have, everybody in my family. My oldest got his driver's license. The very first thing he did when they said, "Do you want to be an organ donor?" He could not wait to say yes when he got his license,
Oh.
because he knew that's what his Uncle Chris did. He's like, "That's what I want to do." So, he really truly understood the meaning. It wasn't just a question to him. It was yes,
He gets it.
and
Yeah.
so I think that, for us, that's what we've held on to, and that's what we've been able to live with. And I hope that more families can find peace, by being able to do that with their loved ones.
Do you think there's a stigma as to why people don't?
Why they don't donate?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, I do. I think there's lots of reasons. There's lots of myths out there. They're not going to want my organs because I'm too old. Not true. There's 80-year-old people that have a 20-year-old liver.
Yeah.
Actually, I have to laugh that they even wanted my brother's liver. My brother was he was known to be the best partier and keep up with the best of them. So
Right.
we all kind of laughed at the fact that it was his liver that they wanted of all things. Um, but a lot of it is like, I'm too old, or hey, I'm sick, and so they won't want this. But there's other things that you can give besides just your organs, like your skin. Like our skin helps burn victims. Your eyes. They're like, well, I wear glasses. Okay, but that's okay because there's all this technology, with laser surgery and things
Yeah.
that they can possibly repair. And if you think about it, even if they give your eyes to someone else, um, they may not have ever seen anything. So if they get your eyes and they have to wear glasses, they're
Yep.
grateful because before they didn't see anything. Right? So there's so many, gifts that we can. I think there's just a misconception about, what it is, or they think that. I know a big one that I always hear is, well, but then they're going to let me die in the hospital because they
That.
know that I'm an organ donor, so they're going to take my organs. That's not true. That's not true. They're not even going to consider any of that until it's time, and that's not what it's about. It is, you are the number one. If you're the one being treated, like, you are number one to them. They're going to treat you. They're going to do everything that they can to save you. But if there's not a way to save you, like, what a great gift to be able to give to somebody else. My brother always said it best. And, we talked about organ donation a little bit before, he had died anyway. Like, he would joke about it and he'd be like, well, I don't need it when I leave. Right. Like, I don't need it when I'm
Right.
gone. And so, kind of have that mentality now that, like, well, I mean, what are we going to do with it?
Right.
We're gone. Like, let somebody else use it if they can use it. And it's just another thing, that you leave behind, but it has such a big impact, and it keeps another family together to be able to hug their loved one another day. I can't hug Chris, but I thank Chris every day because Janet, his recipient, like, she gets to hug her daughter now. She gets to hug her
Yep.
husband every day. Like, they get to spend time together and do those things. If it weren't for Chris, she wouldn't be here. She wouldn't get to do that, and then another family would have lost someone. So I just, yeah, there are stigmas around it, but I think it's just misconceptions and misunderstandings, and but the benefits far outweigh anything else.
But you were out here educating people to help the world be a better place.
Every day, every day.
I love it.
Every chance I get, I'm always out there talking about it. I love to tell Chris's story. I love to tell, how it did help. It is healing. Um, and, just, being able to honor him every year, and, for all the things. His birthday was yesterday. We went to Hooters last night. He's gone to Hooters every year for his birthday since he was 16 years old, and we don't break that tradition. So,
And it's funny because I remember, like, the first time you were going to speak, um, and I remember you posted and you were so nervous and you're like, I don't know if I can do this, but you were fucking rocking it. You were doing it.
things. So now it's just second nature, right? It's just okay.
Yeah,
I'm
it
going to
just
speak this
comes.
over. We're going to go talk about it. And I talked to Chris out loud before I do every single one. I'm like, Chris, be here with me. Like, help me do you proud, brother. Let me do this for you. So I'm going to tell your story again, and you're going to save somebody else today. So if I can save, if I get one person to sign up for the registry, and after I leave and talk, like, I've done my job. He saved another
Mm-hmm.
life. And so, yeah. And, a person, they can save so many lives, like so many lives, just one person.
Yeah.
So yeah, it has a huge, huge domino effect on so many people.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing Chris's story because it is one that I do love watching and seeing you guys do and continue because it is it's a big impact on the world. I mean, honestly, um,
Yep.
do you have any last things for our guests or suggestions or?
I say hang in there, right? Hang in there, find out your why. I know it's hard, why they take your loved one, why. Um, but you can find, hope. I think that's the biggest thing for all of us, is just finding hope. And, what is your hope? What are you going to hold on to? How
Mhm.
can you continue their legacy moving forward so they aren't ever forgotten? They're always remembered. And, you know, it doesn't stop. Years later, I still cry. I'm still going
Yeah.
through grief. It's never going to go away. I'm never going to get over it. That's the big stigma here. Get over it. Never going to get over it. Sorry, not
Right.
going to happen. But you know, there's yeah, hang in there. Hang in there.
All right. Well, we appreciate you being here and thank you everybody for listening and we will see you next time.
All right, thanks.
Maybe.